Hello, everyone. I am so incredibly excited for you all to be here today because I am been wanting to go to Nerd Ayala for years. I absolutely love it here in Argentina. Sorry, I'm going to turn this back on. Okay. I absolutely love Buenos Aires. This is my second time in the city. I think it's one of the most absolutely amazing cities in the entire world. And I'm also incredibly excited to be here today because I get to talk to you about one of the things I am most passionate about in my whole life, and that is cloud editors. And I know that that's kind of a weird thing to be passionate about, but if you've ever tried to get started with a new tool or a new language, new framework or something like that, and you have given up because the setup was too difficult, well, I think that you'll see some of my passion today. All right, next slide. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So what is a cloud editor? Well, next slide. Normally, with a traditional environments, you go out, you buy a computer, and then you download an editor, and then you write code, and then you need an environment to install. You install the tools, you have an environment, and you're able to run that code. With a cloud editor, you don't need to have a machine. All you need is a device that has a browser, and then you go to a web app that is a code editor, and it's connected to a cloud machine that has the cloud environment in it. Next slide. So that's a lot of talking about what it is. I think I'd rather show you. So next slide. So this right here is Project IDX. It is a whole editor in the cloud. And as you can see right here, there's all these things that you can get started with. You can start with Angular, Next.js, Astro, React, Svelte, Vue, Solid, all this stuff. But it's not just web front-end languages. There's also back-end templates. So you can run Go, Python, Node, Rust, Laravel, all these different things that, because it's connected to an actual machine. You can even run databases, which you'll see in a bit, like Postgres. There's AI and ML templates. So if you've wanted to get started with Gemini or LangChain or GenKit, you can do that. But one of the cool things, too, is it actually supports native app development. So you can build apps with Flutter and React Native in the browser. And then soon, we're going to have Android Studio in the browser. So we're going to start with a Flutter app. And so this is the start for a workspace. You give it a name. And then when we start to create it, everything starts to boot up. So it goes out and it starts to provision a real machine in the cloud and that it gets connected to. And we call this a workspace. Because a workspace is a combination of your code editor and then also the cloud machine that it connects to. So as this boots up, you'll notice that we have all this existing code that gets added to the workspace, and then it starts to run all of this code in the browser that or in the machine, and you see it here in the browser, that starts to set up the app. This sets up all the tooling that this needs and all the extensions, and we can see we have the code and then the web app. If I start changing stuff in the app, here, it actually it shows everything on the screen, and it's a real app to interact with. But this isn't just some screen. This is actually an Android emulator, a real Android emulator. I swipe out of the app. I can go look at all the stock apps that come on the emulator. I could go into Google Maps, and you know what? I'm here in Argentina. I can go to my favorite, maybe I can search for my favorite pizza place. So out of the box, we get all of this tooling. We get everything already set up for us. And while it's amazing that this all works in the browser, and it's amazing that we have an Android emulator, this is actually not what I am most excited about. Next slide. Yeah, next slide. What I'm most excited about is that everything that you saw on that machine, all the configuration and everything is customizable, all within a single file. Next slide. See, I think that cloud editors are going to make development and everything in the future so much easier because they provide less friction They make development more accessible, and it allows us to get away out of all this tooling and all this setup and to focus on what matters the most, which is building. Next slide. See, it wasn't that long ago that if you needed to deploy a web app, that you had to do that on a physical on-premise server. So usually this was in what we called a server room, but for the most part it was really just like a really hot closet, and that's what you had to do. You had to have an expensive physical machine. But then suddenly the cloud came. Next slide. And with the cloud, we were able to deploy our apps much easier and much cheaper than before. And this made hosting web apps more accessible and easier for everyone. Next slide. So instead of needing this big, physical, expensive machine, all you had to do was click a button or download a CLI and just run a command, and you could deploy your app out to the web. Next slide. And now, I'm not up here saying that here in 5 to 10 years that we're going to see cloud editors replace local development at the same rate that we saw on-premise servers get replaced by cloud development. But what this does do for us is it opens up a whole new world of options and a whole new way to be productive, write code, and think about building. Next slide. So I want to introduce myself a bit, and now I'm not going to lie to you. This part's going to be really hard because I thought I was going to see notes, and I don't see notes. So this whole time I've been wondering, what am I going to do in this part? So, me llamo David, y trabajo por Google. Y trabajé por el equipo de Firebase, pero ahora trabajo en Project IDX. Y me encanta Argentina. Esta es mi segunda vez en Argentina y me encanta la comida, me encanta el fernet, me encanta el mate, me encantan las mediolunas, me vuelve loco. Y me gusta la música de Argentina, me gusta Soda Stereo y sé que aunque es polémico, también amo los redondos. Y normalmente me gusta dar charlas en español, pero hoy voy a dar esa charla en inglés, pero sé que alguna quiera matarme, voy a tener que cambiar al inglés. Next slide. Oh yeah, next slide, sorry. I just got really wrapped up in the Spanish. Oh my gosh, I forgot to say this, perdón. Según Maxi Friedman, soy un argentino atrapado en el cuerpo de un gringo. Es la verdad. All right, next slide. So if you are here today, make sure to come find us in the booth. I was going to take a photo of me in the booth, but I forgot to do that. So that should be a photo of me in the booth. But so come find me in the booth, and I would love to talk to you all about Project IDX. Next slide. So when I first started with development, I had this new job. And the very first thing we had to do is we had to set up our dev machines so we could actually commit code to the app. And they gave us a document that was 60 pages long. And by the end of it, you would have a working development machine. So you would think. So what ended up happening is that as you went through this document, you constantly were running into errors. And it was your job to figure out why it was broken and then update the document for the next person. And this happened all the time. Next slide. And even when things were set up, nothing still seemed to work well. I was constantly at the desk of a senior developer just asking, like, why do I have this cryptic error? And the problem is that we all had the same issue on our machines. Next slide. Our machines we went through this document at different times, installing different versions, and so therefore our machines were always in different states. So we had the works on my machine problem. Next slide. And the issue is that I could go through and I could have versions on the left, but my coworker Tomas, he could have all these versions on the right. And so we're constantly running into different issues. And then if we even go and check out a different, and this is only if you're working on one project. Many times we're working on different projects at once, and one project maybe require one version, and then another might be pinned to another. And so you have to use different version managers to pull down one for another, and you're constantly switching out different versions of a tool just to run different projects. Next slide. And what we needed is we needed some way to have a standard format to say that we're all on the same consistent things no matter what. Next slide. What we needed was, so imagine actually if you got a new machine and then you were going to install a bunch of tools on the machine. Let's say, next slide, that you install Node.js, which is a server-side, next slide. And let's say you install Node.js, which is a server-side JavaScript framework. Next. Or Python, which is the language of AI and ML. Postgres, which is an incredible open source database. Poetry, which is a package manager for Python. And then there's Docker, which is a containerization system. And all of these things, how would you go about installing them? Next. Well, there's a bunch of different ways you can actually do this. Next. You can go out to Node.js site and you can just go and download the installer manually. Next. And then actually as you go along, this is how it ends up happening for each and every one of them. With Python, with Postgres has an installer. With Poetry, they have an installer. Next. Docker, and Docker can be very tricky to set up across different types of platforms. Next. So with Project IDX, we use a system called Nix. And Nix is a way that is an open source OS that allows you to have reproducible, declarative, and reliable systems. Next. And everything in an IDX workspace is all configured within one file, which is called dev.nix. Next. So all that stuff I just showed you, I'm now going to go onto IDX, and I'm going to show you how you can get all that configured in one file. Next. It's not, though. It's público. Well, we can, what do you want to watch? So imagine there was this code editor on the screen. And there was this file. And as you put entries into this file, it puts tools on the machine. And that's normally what happens. But as this gets loading, I will fill the dead air, as we say in English. Basically, the way it works is we have this one file. And this is truly, there's all these amazing things in code editors nowadays. Everyone talks a lot about AI, which is very cool, and I also have a passion for. But with code editors that are in the cloud, what's amazing is that we now have this standard way of being able to configure these workspaces, and that when you click on them, they just open up. And what I'd show in this video is basically in one file, you can say, in that same kind of array I showed you, you would say, give me Node.js, give me Postgres, give me this. And then as the workspace refreshes, it all just appears on the screen. And then from there, you would just go about developing it as you would in the terminal. You have access to everything, and not only does it work with just the dependencies you need, but you can also specify what browser extensions you need, what environment variables need to go onto the machine. There's lifecycle hooks where you can say, when this workspace is created, run these things. Every time this workspace boots up, run these commands as well. And then when we have this level of configuration that lives in one file, you check this file into source control. You put it on GitHub. You put it on GitLab. You put it anywhere. And then when everyone pulls this file down, we're always on the same version. And that makes everything so much easier to work with. All right, next slide. That was supposed to be like a 10-minute video, so that totally cuts down on the talk. But everything that we saw here is just the beginning. And I mean that, truly, it is only the beginning because you're just starting your product or project. But what this unlocks is the fact that once we have this file and once we start building, there's all these other tools that we also have to work with in IDX. Next slide. Because after this, we start being able to build. And then with IDX, we have all of this tooling for building. So in this GIF right here, this is our interactive chat. And here I can give it a prompt where I say, create a file called app.jsx that uses the reducer pattern using the useReducer hook in React to build a to-do app. And then Gemini goes out, because Gemini is built right into IDX, and then it suggests a file where I can review the changes, and then if I approve of it, it updates it. So it doesn't just give you an answer back, it actually takes action on your behalf. And this works for so many different ones. You can see here, install Express.js is one, run my unit tests, what process is running on port 8080. It will interpret the things that you write on it and turn them into real actionable things. Next slide. So, and also if you need to deploy, there are ways to deploy to Firebase, to Cloud Run, all with a single button, getting API keys for things like Google Maps Platform and Gemini, all done right within IDX. And then you can manage your secrets in Google Cloud Secret Manager, all within IDX without ever needing to leave. Next. So with Project IDX, the whole focus that we're trying to have is that you can build everything onto this one file, and so that way everything is shared across your team, across your projects, and you won't run into any of those issues where you wanted to try a tool and you just couldn't get it figured out. Because hopefully you would just show up to the dashboard and you would see everything up and running, and you wouldn't even have to think about what version does this require, or whatever any tool or dependency is. You can just focus on the actual tool, the code, and building itself. And so I hope now that you all have seen why I'm so passionate about code editors and all the things that we can do in the future. So if you want to talk more, next slide, I'll be at the booth. See, look, photo me in the booth, sorry, one second. I will be at the booth, and I'm so excited to answer any of your questions, even though we have Q&A, so I'll answer them too. Next slide. So now I can change slides. That's my last one. That was great timing. All right.
Bueno, tenemos preguntas del público.
Sí.
A ver. Adelante.
Bien, bueno, obviamente la pregunta la pueden hacer en español o en inglés, como quieran. Si en español, yo se la traduzco sin problemas. ¿Sí? How do you feel talking Spanish, English? It's all good?
¿Por qué no los dos?
Ok. Preguntas, están pasando ahí el micrófono, no veo mucho. Allá. ¿Sí?
Acá.
Allá, al fondo.
Bien.
Cerca de la puerta.
Voy a parar. Hey, David, thank you. Here.
Ah, okay, there you are. Sounds like the voice of God.
I'm God. Now, actually, this looks amazing, but I'm wondering if this would be a subscription type service. Would be there any fee? And is it already open so any mortal can use it right now?
Right now we are in we're in beta, and so everything is at no cost. In the future, we definitely have ideas and plans for how to make it better, potentially through a paid service or whatever. But it's really important to us that we're able to, in the future, still allow I've worked on Firebase for a really long time. I very much understand the importance of the free tier, and that's something that's still near and dear to my heart. So that's something that we're working on for sure.
Bien. Bueno, allá.
Hola, gracias.
Hola.
Gracias por la charla, me gustó mucho. Tengo una pregunta. ¿Cuánto afecta la latencia a no sé, como uno lo siente? O sea, mi editor de texto es algo muy importante para mí, y si anda 1 milisegundo más lento, 2 milisegundos, me molesta. ¿Cuánto afecta la latencia? Y una segunda pregunta es, ¿qué tan rápidas son las virtual machines que hay atrás? O sea, ¿esto va a andar más rápido que mi computadora o más lento? Gracias.
He was asking about the latency and how fast it is compared to local development.
Exactly.
I see all those Spanish classes. If my teacher's watching, I'm like, see? Also, I get that question a lot. It's kind of a cheat code. I mean, yes, is it going to be as fast as local development? No, because local development is local. However, are you going to notice in many cases? No. We focus so heavily on performance that, yes, if you did profiling on one, you could see maybe a difference, but you're talking about the actual user experience of it, running a lot of the commands, it feels very instant. We actually have one of the back-end engineers here. He's over there, so. Alex, will you come on the stage? No, I'm just kidding. But so, yes, there are certain times, especially depending on your internet connection, where you might, you'll notice things. But all in all, like, we optimize heavily, so when you are building that you don't notice. And also one of the things that you'd see is that we, by everything I showed you today, by being able to set up environments very consistently and quickly and everything, is that you're going to win out on a lot of time in other places that are going to be more difficult in local development. So like I said, it's not this is replacing local dev, but you can see that they have different benefits than the other one would have.
Bien.
Primero, muchas gracias por la charla. Y segundo, ¿cuál sería la ventaja, si es que existe, frente a las tecnologías como dev containers? No, pues me suena algo muy parecido a esa solución, pero en la nube.
Did you get it? What is the difference between dev containers? It sounds like very similar.
Alex, you come to the stage. From what I know, with dev containers is definitely something that's more Docker-based, and with something that Nix is one thing that I know with Nix is that you saw, actually you didn't see because that video didn't work, but basically when you change something in Nix, in our system dev.nix, this little button pops up and it says, hey, you need to reload the environment for these to take effect. And Nix has a registry with it, so like something very similar that you would see with NPM. And so Nix packages are things that are like, our Node.js is a Nix package, Python's a Nix package, Postgres. And what ends up happening is when you refresh, we pull this down from Nix registry, and then we put it on your machine, but we also can wipe the entire partition every single time that you reload, because everything is that isolated and reproducible. With dev containers, I think that there's definitely, I don't know if it is quite that level of reproducibility, but it also works with Docker, so I do think that they also have other benefits on their side. So you're kind of dealing with two different tool chains between dev containers and Nix. So yeah, whether you're more on the Docker side or more on Nix. And I wish I could answer more about the Docker side, but I'm in my lane and I know that the most.
¿Preguntas de Swapcar tenemos?
Yes, we have more questions here. How much this gonna cost for individual devs?
So right now, everything is free of charge or at no cost. And like I said, in the future, we really want, I can't really comment anything on price or anything, but we're very much working on making sure that it's accessible for everyone.
¿Alguna otra pregunta por acá? Allá al fondo.
Buenas. La pregunta es, siendo que manejan Nix Package, con Python, ¿cómo es la experiencia cuando tenés que manejar paquetes que no están dentro del Nix repository? ¿Es buena la experiencia?
He's asking about working with Python when those packages are not in the repository.
Oh, so yes, okay. So think about Nix packages differently than you would think about like a pip or poetry package. A Nix package is something that's usually very fundamental to the system, so the language or some tool like that. Sometimes there's some overlap between the two where they really package everything all together if it's like a very popular Python library like Flask or something like that. However, I like to draw the line at, I will use a Nix package for Python, but I'm still managing all my dependencies through pip. itself. So I still, with my requirements.txt file, I'm still pulling everything down through that, but I'm getting this Nix level management. And I'll let pip or node or npm or all the different dependency managers out there for libraries. I let them manage that because that's what they're that's what they're built for. So there is sort of you use a dependency manager to download a dependency manager. So it's the dependency manager is the way to think about it.
¿Más preguntas de Swapcard? ¿Hay más preguntas de Swapcard?
Sí, tenemos una más. Sorry if you said it before, because I'm trying to speak in English. My first time. Is there any friction while migrating from VS Code? Can I preserve all my keywords, shortcuts, extensions, etc.?
Yeah, so underneath the hood is it's all built on Code OSS, which is the open source of like VS Code. The VS Code is all based off of their open source one called Code OSS. That's what we ship over to the browser. So you will find that many of the things that you use in VS Code work similarly in IDX as well. One of the things I actually showed was importing, in that video, was I was importing VS Code's settings file that just worked in IDX. So a lot of the shortcuts, anything that you would see for the most part in a settings file or changing fonts and everything in user settings is very much, very similar in IDX as well.
Más preguntas por acá. Tenemos...
Hey there.
Al medio.
Hey there.
Allá.
Welcome to Buenos Aires.
What
Got
is this?
two
God-
questions. One short one and one long one. Hey there. Nice to meet you. So, easy and short one. Is this technology dependent strictly on the Chromium stack or Chrome specifically, or will it run in all that environment of browsers that we have nowadays?
So it currently, it runs in multiple different browsers. It works on an iPad, so within Safari. Also that's something that is, we do lots of things that are cutting edge due to the nature of the browser. So we would be closer to run into things that would change or wouldn't be experimental on one versus the other. But it's, I would say keeping things consistent across those major browsers is something like super important to us, and so right now that is the case. Like you can, like I said, you can run it on an iPad in Safari, you can run it in Firefox. There are a lot of browsers out there, so to guarantee everyone is impossible, but within your major browsers, yes.
Good. ¿Tenemos más preguntas?
Allá al medio.
¿Sí?
Si le acercan un micrófono, porfi.
Ahí al medio.
Hi.
Hello.
I was going to ask if you have a backup plan if VS Code goes the same way that Atom did. I see your whole
Like
stack.
people stop using it.
Right.
We would all need a backup plan. In terms of that, no. VS Code is.
No hay backup.
VS Code is, like the ground beneath us at this point. So to say no outright, no, that is definitely not something that we expect on. It is a Code OSS. All that it is an incredible, amazing community full of like the active development. It's incredible. It's a massive pillar. Sure, lots of things could happen, but right now that's something that we depend on, but also something that we are interested in supporting. Like it's an open source platform, so it's something that we talk about being able to make things upstream and whatnot. So we like to look at it as a collaborative effort and not just one ownership versus the other.
A ver si veo más preguntas.
Acá
Levantan la
tenemos
mano.
otra, Marian,
Dale.
pero la traducís vos.
Dale. Sí, sí.
La implementación con GitHub, GitLab o Bitbucket está por defecto a través de SSH o cómo manejan las conexiones. ¿Se pueden manejar conexiones a través de AWS, a través de credenciales?
Do you have a default SSH connection with, Bitbucket, all those GitLab, or do you have like in an AWS
Yeah,
credential?
you can. So you connect. We do an import through GitLab or GitHub. So within the within the dashboard, if there's a button that says import, from GitHub or GitLab, and you click there, you paste in a URL. We have a whole open an IDX system where you can just use a URL parameter to put your GitHub URL or GitLab URL, and it pulls it in from there, so you can deep link into workspaces and things like that. So yes.
Good. ¿Más preguntas? Levantan la mano. Yo trato de ver por la luz, pero creo que no hay nadie más. ¿Tenemos alguna otra pregunta de Swapcard?
Tenemos más preguntas de Swapcard. ¿El sistema incorpora un versionado automático de los cambios en los archivos?
Do you have an automated versioning of files, within the system?
So that's the beauty of it. It is your. You think about it like your machine in the cloud. So you want to use Git. Yes, Git. You can install Git on it. You can put whatever. It is your machine. So yes, most people are going to be using Git, and you can manage that. Git is just as you would on your local machine as well. So yes.
Great. Over there.
Hey, I'm back. You had the more complex question, maybe?
All right.
So it seems that what you're talking about here, where you seem to be going, is something like a code as code, similar to what you call infrastructure as code, where you are just starting to build things behind the scenes and orchestrating. Is that the direction you're planning or you're hoping to go?
Sorry, I just need to clarify. What did you mean by? Sorry, just repeat it one more time.
Of course.
Yeah.
So let me clarify. So we're in a world where we're not talking about infrastructure as code, in the sense that we write code, we got infrastructure. What you seem to be referring to here could be called as code, as redundant as that sounds.
You're basically saying this is like Terraform for your local machine or for your own machine?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, you could draw an analogy to that. So yes, this is basically one standard configuration for saying we need this across our machines. Or when I set up my machine, I want it to look like this. And instead of what I showed through the slides where it's go through 8 different installers at some point in time, maybe you do it all in one day, maybe you do it over the span of a year. And so at some point you go pull down another project and it says you don't have the right version of Node on it, and so you make the update then. All of those changes are ad hoc and random, and then that's what puts systems in different states. And eventually when you're trying to, something comes out that excites you, or you discover something and you want to set it up, and you have just a really long list to go through. Not only is that difficult to achieve through, but you're also just continuing the cycle of like making other random and ad hoc updates to your machine to get it to work. And I don't mean to say like, oh, that's horrible and you should never do that. Like that is just, there's a certain level of personal development that's just not a problem. But when you kind of scale that up to teams, or you scale that up to trying to get people started, like if you have a big open source project and you want to get people started on it, having a tool like this is really helpful for that, where you just declare everything that's needed in this file, and then the system's just able to just put it on every single machine in the same standard way. So yes, that is very much important when you're trying to do things outside of your own purview on your machine.
I think we have 1 more minute for one more question.
All right.
¿No?
Nada más.
Un minuto. ¿Una última pregunta o no? ¿Estamos?
Allá. En medio.
La hacemos rápido y la respondemos rápido, ¿sí?
Sí, súper rápido. Quería saber si va a tener un modo offline.
Will it have an offline mode?
So right now everything is cloud connected, but that is one of the most common questions that we get, and something that we are interested in exploring of what that would look like. So right now, no, everything is cloud connected, but I agree with you, it would be something very cool and something very important as well.
Muy bien. Eso es todo, así que un fuerte aplauso, por favor.